Hello everyone. Today, we're going to discuss some rather surprising updates regarding the new character arriving in version 4.6, Pearl. As always, all of the information we'll be covering comes from credible sources. Okay, in the previous video, we took a comprehensive look at all the leaks we currently know about Pearl. If you haven't watched that video yet, I highly recommend checking it out first. This time, we're still going to talk about some interesting information regarding Pearl. Why? Because several new pieces of information suddenly surfaced just a few hours after Pearl's official drip marketing was announced. So, we're going to take a look at these new updates and see what additional information we can learn about Pearl. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. This update regarding Pearl comes from a source you probably already know, a Bilibili-based leaker named Uncle Latte. However, I do want to point out that we can't take everything from Uncle Latte as 100% reliable. Uncle Latte is actually known for sometimes adding incorrect information to their leaks, so I would say their information is more of a 50-50 situation. A few hours ago, Uncle Latte uploaded a video on Bilibili discussing Pearl. After going through the information, I managed to pick out several important points that I think are worth discussing together. And as always, the original information was in Chinese, so I've translated it into English. There may still be a few words that didn't translate perfectly, so keep that in mind. With that said, let's start with the first point. The first point mentioned by Uncle Latte is that Pearl will most likely be a preservation-style shielder disguised as an Elation character. In other words, Pearl would technically be an Elation character, but her primary role would be providing shields, similar to how preservation characters function. This would be somewhat similar to Hyacinth, who follows remembrance but can still provide healing like an abundance character. And technically, this information isn't exactly new. We've already heard similar claims from sources such as Seal Leaks and others. However, the fact that multiple sources are pointing toward Pearl being an Elation sustain makes the possibility that she is specifically designed as an Elation sustain seem increasingly likely. Okay, let's move on to the second piece of information. According to Uncle Latte, the playable version of Pearl may actually not have her own Elation skill. Wait, if that's the case, then why is Pearl an Elation character if she doesn't have her own Elation skill? Well, the answer is actually quite interesting. According to the information, whenever an AHA instant is triggered or takes action, Pearl may use her own unique ability to analyze and imitate another ability. She would then copy one of the Elation skills belonging to one of her teammates and use that ability once. So, the concept is somewhat similar to yaoguang and Elation Trailblazer. Personally, I'm not sure how many Elation skills Pearl will be able to copy. Maybe she can only copy the Elation skill from one character, similar to how EMC works, or perhaps she could copy Elation skills from all allies. However, based on the wording, it seems more likely that Pearl can only copy the Elation skill of one character, potentially the ally specifically selected by Pearl. That said, compared to Elation Trailblazer's ultimate, which is honestly somewhat underwhelming because it only allows one teammate to activate their Elation ability once using a fixed 20 punchline. Pearl's copied Elation skill could be much easier to trigger repeatedly because it comes from an Elation skill, rather than an ultimate like EMC's mechanic. It could also potentially benefit from the various powerful bonuses provided by AHA Instant. So, it seems likely that the copied Elation skill would also use the team's current punchline as normal. For example, if the team has 100 punchline when AHA Instant takes action, the Elation skill copied by Pearl could potentially use those 100 punchline as well. Next, we have the third point, and there's another important detail we need to pay attention to. According to Uncle Latte, Pearl could potentially replace Huahua as an energy support sustain. As we know, the current Elation characters, including Silver Wolf, Evanescia, and Yaoguang, still rely heavily on energy from the current Queen of Sustain, Huahua, to keep their rotations running smoothly. That means if Pearl is truly designed to completely replace Huohuo as the dedicated sustain for Elation teams, then theoretically, she should also have some kind of mechanic that allows her to provide energy to her teammates. This would allow the entire team to consistently get their ultimates back and maintain their rotations without running into energy issues. And if Pearl really is a sustain who also provides energy support and takes over Huohuo's role, other teams that heavily rely on energy support while also having relatively low survivability could potentially benefit significantly from Pearl as well. Now, we have the fourth and final point, which is probably the most interesting one to me. Pearl may potentially have a DOT mechanic. Yes, you heard that correctly. If this is true, then Ice would finally have its own DOT mechanic. And actually, we discussed Ice DOT quite a long time ago, around 9 months ago. That Ice DOT mechanic was eventually implemented in version 3.8 through a combat event. The Ice DOT effect was called Glacial Erosion. According to the HSR wiki, this DOT deals damage based on a percentage of the target's maximum HP, somewhat similar to physical spleed effect. However, personally, I think this is probably just copium. The reason Uncle Latte brought this up is because Pearl happens to be the only Ice character introduced since that version 3.8 event. They also mentioned that we can't completely rule out the possibility that, after waiting for around a year, one of those teams could eventually receive a second major support. If all of this turns out to be true, Pearl could potentially be extremely powerful. She could copy Elation skills, regenerate energy, potentially have a DOT mechanic, and on top of all that, she's supposedly a character focused on providing shields and sustain. If Pearl were a support character, then maybe all of this would still be somewhat reasonable. But if Pearl really is a sustain while having all of these mechanics, then her kit could become pretty overwhelming. But yeah, those are some of the latest updates regarding Pearl. And once again, I want to emphasize that Uncle Latte's information is basically 50-50, so don't take everything here at face value. What do you think about all these new updates regarding Pearl? Which mechanic caught your attention the most, and which one do you think sounds the least believable? Be sure to share your thoughts, opinions, and speculation in the comments below. And with that, we've reached the end of today's discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video all the way to the end. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow Honkai starrail players so they don't miss out on the latest information. Your support through likes and subscribes means a lot to the growth of this channel and allows me to continue creating informative content in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next discussion.